Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Our guest today is Jimmy Carter, the former president of the United States. Mr. President, thank you very much for being with us. Since you left the White House, you've been a very strong advocate on democracy, but lately you've a strong advocacy campaign in favor of women. You wrote a powerful book called A Call to Action, Women, Religion, Violence and Power.
Yes.
Why this advocacy for women? You're not the only one, but why did you feel you needed to speak up on this specific issue right now?
We've had a chance to see, perhaps more than anyone else, the plight of women and girls throughout the world. And it has been truly shocking for us. And for the last 3 years, the Carter Center has concentrated annual Human Rights Convention or session on how religion and violence have contributed to the gross human rights violations of women and girls, which is by far the most serious human rights violations on earth and basically unaddressed. So I decided to write a book about it.
Why is it unaddressed? Why do you feel this is not being taken up by other people?
Well, part of the reason is that both in Christianity and in Islam and also in other religions, there are people who distort the Holy Scriptures to maintain that in the eyes of God or Allah, that women are inferior to men. And for instance, my wife and I withdrew from the Southern Baptist Convention about 15 years ago.
Precisely for that.
Because they ordained that women were inferior to men, that women could not act as priests or deacons or chaplains, or even that women can't teach a classroom of students in a Baptist seminary if there's a boy in the class, because you can find individual verses out of the 30,000 or so in the Bible that maintain all these things when they ignore the basic premises of Christianity, which Jesus Christ always treated women as equal or superior and went out of his way to prove that women were equal in the eyes of God. And the same thing applies in other religions as well. Also, I think that America and other countries in their internal affairs and also in going too rapidly to armed conflict have promoted the idea that violence is acceptable. One quick statistic is that we have about 7 times as many people in prison in America now as we had when I was president. And 8 times as many black women are in prison now as there were in 1980 when I left the White House. And we also have a death penalty in our country and in many other countries, as you know. These kinds of things contribute to the deterioration of basic moral standards that prevents abuse of any particular person.
For you, I mean, there's a whole list of discriminations.
Yes.
But for you, what is the most worrying one against women? Is it female circumcision? Is it honor killings? For you, if you need to pick on a policy list, which one would you address in a very sensible way right now?
It's the murder of baby girls by parents.
Murder.
The murder of baby girls by parents. And more recently, with the advent of sonograms, the abortion of a fetus when the parents know that the newborn baby is going to be a girl. For instance, there are now about 160 million females missing from the face of the earth.
You mentioned religious leaders. I understand you had an exchange of letters with Pope Francis. He's supposed to come to the United States. He's indicated that he wants to change things inside the Catholic Church. Obviously, there's a lot of resistance, especially on those issues. Do you think he is really willing to change the place of women in the Catholic Church?
I don't think that that the Pope is going to authorize women being priests or even deacons in the church.
Do you regret that?
I regret that, but he has, in his response to my letter, he told me that he would predict that under his leadership, that women's role in the church would be greatly expanded.
And you trust
this? And I trust that he will carry out that commitment. Okay. He's already done so by appointing women, for instance, to a committee that assess the abuse of children, including little girls by priests. But so he's made some moves in that direction. He's made some speeches independent of my letter. But as far as going all the way and letting women be treated exactly equal to men, in the eyes of God. I don't think the Catholic Church and the Southern Baptist Convention and others are willing to do this.
Okay. An area where he did play a role was the rapprochement between the United States and Cuba.
Yes.
The Pope did play a role. Obviously, President Obama also played a role. You tried yourself when you were in power. Cuba was just taken off the U.S. State Department terrorist list, so it seems things are moving. How would you describe this development?
It's a very worthwhile development. It's long overdue. When I was in office, I removed all restraints on Americans' travel to Cuba. They were later reimposed. And I also established an interest section, which is just short of an embassy. We have about 300 people working now in the former embassy in Havana because of the action that I took while I was president. So I've been waiting to see that one of my successors would move, and I'm very glad to see that President Obama has finally taken limited steps so far.
And you think this will go all the way?
I hope and pray it will. We should lift the embargo or economic sanctions against the Cuban people, which only perpetuates I think the dictatorial policies of the communists, and it lets the Castro brothers blame all of their economic woes on the United States embargo. And I think if we lift that, it would be good for our country and for Cuba.
You're confident Congress will do that?
No, I'm not confident, but I hope that they will.
An area where you recently traveled with another group you're involved with, the Elders, who are prominent former heads of state and government, is the Middle East. You went there, you went to Jerusalem. Once again, you raised the alarm, said another Gaza war is possible. There's no prospect for peace anymore. On that issue, are you disappointed by the Obama administration's record?
I think that John Kerry, Secretary of State, did the best he could. He was very aggressive, and
he failed.
And he failed because of the presence in the leadership of Israel by Netanyahu, who I think
Netanyahu is the main obstacle.
He's been a disaster for carrying out the policies even of all his Israeli predecessors. He has disavowed the basic principles of United Nations Resolution 242, which Prime Minister Begin reconfirmed when I negotiated with him in Egypt. And he's made it clear that under his administration there would be no two-state solution, and he derogated the presence of Israeli citizens who happen to be Arabs when they went to the polls to vote. And I think the cabinet that he's now put together is extremely right-wing, or rejection of any peace proposal that could possibly be envisioned.
So the peace process for now is dead?
It's dead because of Netanyahu. And I think that the Palestinians, the United States, all the rest of the world wants Israel to withdraw from occupied territories with some minor adjustments that are mutually negotiated, and to give the Palestinians basic human rights. They don't have human rights now. They are horribly persecuted by the Israelis, and the confiscation of their land continues under Netanyahu.
I want to get quickly to another Secretary of State who you did not mention, maybe for a reason in the efforts on the Middle East, Hillary Clinton. She is now officially a candidate for the next presidential election. She's a woman, obviously. I think as an advocate for women, you should be happy, but I sense that you're not totally convinced by what she has accomplished in the past and what she would accomplish as president.
Well, I think as far as Mideast peace is concerned, I don't think there's any doubt that John Kerry took a much more aggressive and active role than did Hillary Clinton. I think she will be the nominee of the Democratic Party almost without question, and I will certainly be fully supporting her as a candidate.
And you think this will really break the glass ceiling?
I don't know about that. You know, we've had women in the past elected to top positions of leadership, with the prime ministership of India, for instance, and Mrs. Gandhi was prime minister. My mother was in the Peace Corps in India at that time, and Mrs. Gandhi was not any champion of women's rights. In fact, she was a champion of a kind of family planning that I just mentioned that has resulted in the abuse of girls. So that doesn't guarantee it. But I think Hillary Clinton has shown, when she was First Lady and her husband was president, in the meeting on gender equality in China, she spoke out very strongly for women's rights, and I don't think there's any doubt that she will take a leadership role in that respect.
Just last issue, race relations in the United States. We've seen incidents in Ferguson and Baltimore, again, riots, let's call it this way. When President Obama was elected, another glass ceiling was broken. Do you think he's been too shy on trying to address those issues? That maybe there is a disappointment that Barack Obama did not take the issue as much as he could have.
I don't think it's fair to blame him for the riots and so forth that have taken place in the United States. There's a limit to what a president can do. And I think that since he is African American, there's been a kind of a resurgence of racist tendencies in our country, just resenting the fact that a black man was the president of our country. And so I think that the long-time ravages of slavery and then 100 years of racial discrimination under American law has had a very serious, permanent adverse effect on the average African American in my country. And they still don't have equal participations, for instance, in local police forces. And over a period of years of kind of accepting the fact falsely or erroneously that racial equality had come to our country, we see this element of racism generated. And that has been demonstrated quite vividly lately in the mistreatment of black suspects by some local police forces. And so this is something that's been very serious for us. And I think we need to correct that problem, and maybe the disturbances that we've